You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Batuta Advocate, on Desert Rock FM.
Well, welcome back to the Batuta Advocate radio show. It's been a big December for us so far. You're joined by myself, Clancy Overall, editor, and editor-at-large, Errol Parker. We've just wrapped up a mini tour of the big cities in Australia with the book launch of How Good's Australia. So we were down there in Opera House in Sydney, did a couple of nights there.
The Outpost.
In
Brisbane.
In Brisbane, the top part of the new festival hall up there, Fortitude Hall they call it.
Yeah, it really is Brisbane's answer to Mona.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Scott Hutchinson, for building that one, and the Powderfinger guys. And of course, we did a Alex Theatre in Melbourne with Luke Bracey as the host, Hollywood star Luke Bracey, and that was a bit of fun. And then we went out all night and discovered this Melbourne institution called Revolver, which was interesting. As journalists, I wouldn't mind getting back in there with a camera because it is a zoo.
I think the rules are the same as in Berghain, where I've just been. I don't think you'll be ever allowed to film in there because what goes on in there is illegal. I was offered the use of the urinal or the use of someone's key. I don't know why he had his keys out in the toilet, but I said, I'm just in here to take a shit. Could you get out of the cubicle, please?
Yeah, it really is a city that never sleeps, Melbourne. They impressed us for a bunch of latent racist hipsters. They've done quite well. Now, today we're back in the Diamantina. It's a balmy 48 degrees outside, and we're actually lucky in this part of the world that we're one of the few kind of rural regions in Australia that aren't currently being ravaged by bushfires that were caused by the Greens, who refuse to do backburning because they have such control of the local councils in rural areas.
It might be a bit of a coincidence, but under Joe, we basically took out every tree in the Diamantina Shire, and now we haven't got bushfires. We're down there, in the socialist progressive caliphate of Western Sydney. You've got bushfires from the great town of Lithgow all the way out to the seaside at Gosford. Yeah,
and of course Port Macquarie, Coffs Harbour, very prominent Greens hotspots as well, have been struggling due to bushfires that were aided by the Australian Greens Party. Anyway, Sir Joe did help us a lot. He did a lot of great things for Queensland. He was quite entrepreneurial with his land clearing efforts. Today, actually, on that note of entrepreneurialism and just going out and having a go, we are joined by, I guess you could say, a pioneer of modern Australian swimwear, Adam Linthorpe, founder of many things, but most notably Budgy Smuggler.
And also, Adam's going to tell us a little bit about AIME, the Australian Indigenous Mentoring Experience, which is a volunteer network and mentorship program that Adam's helped set up. It's headquartered down there in Redfern, down there in Sydney. And Adam's going to tell us a bit about that, as well as how he built Budgy Smuggler up from the ground. This podcast is going to be a bit different this week. We're going to do a bit of a deep dive on Adam's business, on where he's found success, about where he hasn't found success, and the lessons he's learnt along the way about, what makes it a uniquely Australian company.
How are you, mate? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm doing well, lads. Good to be here.
Now, we've known about Budgy Smuggler for a few years now. Errol and I have actually flown to Sydney. You've flown us to Sydney to MC the Most Ordinary Rig competition.
That's right.
Which was first won, what year was it first held? 2015? 16?
2016, yeah.
2016 was won by good man Boy and Dingo Dan. He got a billboard. That was the prize.
In Mount Isa.
Mount Isa.
Which I guess from a business perspective was good for you. As opposed to, a bloke from the F1 who would have won, up on the Central Coast. That would have been a bit dearer, I'd say.
Yeah, I think it cost about $800 and no one replaced it for like 6 months. And the in-store was like $500. So, the rates in Mount Isa are good.
Now, Lenny, we want to talk to you about the story of Budgy Smuggler and how it came to be. You've been working non-stop. You've got a bit of a crew in here. Jared, also known as the Tinder Fellas, sitting to my left, and of course BJ Hartman, the former next captain of the Waratahs. He's sitting here as well. But Lenny, basically since, well, not day one, but as its current carnation, you have been on the ground the whole time for Budgy Smuggler.
Yeah, it's been about 11 years since I sort of took the reins. Initially, when I took over, I thought the hardest thing about running a new business and Budgy Smuggler would be cashing all the checks and backing up for the fashion parties. 12 years later, and I'm yet to be invited to a single fashion party, but if anyone has any offers out there, I'm often available. But yeah, no, it's been an interesting evolution, I guess. If you remember back then, it was a kind of time when board shorts were well and truly past the knees.
Oh, yeah. The shin swingers.
That's it.
The non-European style.
That's it. The curtains of shame.
The chafe-inducing SMP boardies. We know the types. Now, you didn't actually come up with the idea, though. You pretty much were just thrown the hospital pass of a formulated
of
business.
a loss-making hobby.
Because
loss-making hobby.
unless you know the man, this is basically a nocturnal invention of Kevin Rudd's former advisor of media, Lachlan Harris. How did you come to meet Lachlan? Because, he is quite a mysterious bloke, if I should say so myself.
Was this circa?
And even more mysterious that he's A, working for Kevin Rudd, and B, trying to sell swimwear and belts on the side. How did you end up coming to know Lachlan?
Well, initially how I found out about Budgy Smuggler, I didn't know Lachlan actually until after I'd taken over Budgy. So how I came to know Budgy Smuggler was I was studying in the States and I had to renew my visa, and they don't let you do it in Canada or Mexico or a contiguous body. So I went into an SDA, looked at a map, and the closest country was Guatemala.
Right.
So I said, okay, well, I'll fly there and catch a bus back to Arizona where I was living. And so I thought that would take 3 or 4 days based on my rough geography and comparing Mexico to the size of Australia. It took me 6 weeks. But along the way, I saw 2 guys wearing like fluoro sort of smugglers with Budgy Smuggler written on the back. And I thought, oh, fuck, that's pretty funny. And couldn't believe someone sort of hadn't done it before. And then when I got back to Sydney, hit up Budgy Smuggler, and I actually knew the guy who was helping to run it for Lockie. And I'm just like, mate, if you need a hand with anything, I'm around. And Lockie's vision for the brand at that point was basically just getting loose in them, and he'd set like a bunch of 12 blokes in cargo bar wearing nothing with a bar tab. And that's how it began for me. And then when he won like from the very like Stephen Bradbury kind of position, you think Kevin Rudd's a long odds.
Yeah.
He wound up being press secretary for Kevin Rudd and the Prime Minister, and potentially having a company with a bunch of loose units running around in next to nothing was going to be a liability.
A bit of a conflict of interest, I'd say, with Kevin Rudd. So what were you studying at university in Arizona? Was it something related to running a swimwear business?
No, I was doing history and Spanish.
Yes.
And then I
The
did...
pillars of business.
That's it. And I did an arts commerce degree at Sydney Uni and got me a job as a graduate at ANZ Bank, but I was not working in the kind of high-end suits area. I was at the branch in Brookvale.
Oh, yeah.
Where, everyone was dressed by Lowe's. I was the GFC at this time as well. It was 2008.
Yeah. It's a great time to start a career in finance.
Your loan for a jet ski has been denied, so I'm sorry.
It wasn't too bad, actually.
Well, you were in the Zali Stegel, a very affluent electorate too. So if anyone's going to be kind of hit by the GFC, they're probably a bit safer in that part of the world. Or?
Yeah, maybe, but they were firing people at a great rate of knots. Like, you'd come in and you'd be like, where's Kevin? It's like, Kevin's no longer with the bag. And I'm like, started hearing that a lot. And in the city, there was whole floors getting fired. And I think it prompted in me, used to think that working for a bank or a big company was a really safe option. And then when you see whole floors of people getting sacked, you're like, oh my God, this is actually the least safe option for me. Plus, I fucking hated it. I just used to sit out the window all day going, fuck me, there is better things I can be doing with my life. And I sucked as well. Like, I was giving almost zero fucks. So
you were just basically when they needed someone to speak Spanish, they'd bring you in.
Yeah, small market. I had a good boss. The setup of the company and stuff was great, but just the tedious shit you have to go through was just killing me. And so I was looking for something else to do, some other options. And around that time, two things happened. One was the opportunity to take over Budgy Smuggler, and another one was I started as the finance director, inverted commas, for an Aboriginal non-profit called AIME, the Australian Indigenous Mentoring Experience. But there was like 2 staff there at this stage, so that it wasn't really a whole lot of work. But I was just basically interested to do something other than what I was doing.
So tell us about the day when you finally quit your job at the bank and you started your first day at Budgy.
Yeah, well, so I still kept my job at the bank for like 7 or 8 months because
that's wise.
Yeah, well, Budgy had no real sales at the time.
It was just a brand.
Spanish
it was a brand. I think
about risk. I guess.
Say that again.
Spanish and history taught you a lot about risk. Then I guess
100%. And so I was like, well, there's no income for Budgy, and there was no income at the non-profit. That was just like I was a volunteer. So, yeah, the income side of the ledger was pretty low. So I kept my job for a while. And, yeah, it was like the early days of Budgy I was living with Stephen O'Keefe, who went on to be a Test cricketer, still a cricketer now. And so, and like back in those days, there was no like Shopify, or I can't remember, I don't think it was like Gmail or anything like that. Like you had to have a server to have an email with like @budgysmuggler.com.au. which I couldn't check remotely. So I'd have to do like come home from the office, work like during the evenings, and I'd struck up an arrangement with Sock that he would send the orders for me. There's some dispute about how much I paid him. I think it was up around the $2.50 per order. He reckons it was around about 75-cent mark, which I'd then deduct from his rent bill. But at that stage, he was playing just mainly a lot of Call of Duty. So yeah, it was probably a welcome distraction for him. Yeah, that's how I got going. But actually, so after quitting at the bank, I then went to work at AIME, the charity. So by this stage, that was more of an established kind of non-profit. And I actually worked there full-time for the next 7 years. So it was actually 8 years before I quit my job to do Budgy full-time.
So the Australian Indigenous Mentoring Experience kind of has worked alongside, in your career anyway, you've kind of managed 2 big brands there. You've spent 7 years at AIME alongside building Budgy Smuggler. What do you see? Do you see any similarities between those two, or was one was a job and then one was a hobby?
Yeah, no, I mean, they were both things I was super like kind of interested in. And then also one of the best things about working at something you hate is you actually appreciate when you get to like turn up to work and do
the next
something.
job.
Yeah, you care about. And like the early days at AIME, like so there's a bloke, Jack Manning Bancroft, who is the founder of AIME and was kind of the driving force through my time there. But like, yeah, we were really like in the trenches sort of thing. We called it AIME jail. We'd get there at 8 in the morning, stay till 8 at night. And I thought that I would have all this time for Budgy Smuggler, but actually for about a 4 or 5 year period while we built AIME. So my role there was like the head of partnerships and finance. So it was an awesome job because I got to travel all around Australia. So you go into like regional areas, all the capital cities, and then you're meeting with, people from the unis, government, university students, Aboriginal land councils, and then recruited within AIME, we had like a lot of the most talented Aboriginal students and young people from around Australia. So it was like just an awesome induction into out of the Northern Beaches kind of bubble.
Yeah. So tell us about the premise of AIME. I mean, the general idea is you pair up uni students, predominantly white uni students, and you pair them with high school students? Yeah,
so the premise of AIME was to support Aboriginal kids through high school.
Yep.
You'd recruit volunteer mentors at the universities. Initially it was one-on-one, and then scale it transitioned to more of a kind of mentor-led kind of program, but would support the kids through to year 12 and then on to either university, TAFE, work, and that we'd track the students all the way through. And all the programs at each of the universities were run by young Indigenous, generally like uni students, people who'd just come out of university. So, yeah, when we started, it was just like the one school in Redfern. And then, I don't know, by the time I left, I think it was about 4,000 or 5,000 students around 20 campuses around Australia. So,
And the graduation rate for those students was
on par with or ahead of non-Indigenous students.
Yeah.
And most of those students were coming from like lower socioeconomic areas. So
the results stood for themselves, really.
the results, yeah, were really, and I think still are really good. So
Yeah.
Well, you were like, because I've only been on Instagram, about 5 years. You were a real early pioneer in the influencer model. I mean, we started to see this brand starting to pop up in the media. You know, you've gone everywhere from the backside of Georgie Rose all the way up to Kirtley Beale, right next to the future King of England. I mean, how has the influencer model helped grow your business?
yeah, it's like there's a certain irony to it because it's not something that we've targeted necessarily. But I guess we're kind of a swimwear brand that's got big out of people not actually swimming in them.
Yeah.
And so early on, that was such a good way to get like the message out there.
Yep.
And people, you know, we just encourage people to do random shit in them, you know. So we had pictures.
Skiing's a big one. Some brave people out there skiing in Budgy Smugglers.
Yeah, the winter sports model, the big people riding camels in Egypt in them. And it just prompted something. I think maybe like the self-deprecating kind of humour of it lent itself to people just going out there and getting.
I think it's almost like, you know, the anti-brand to what swimsuits in particular for men were at the time. I mean, you saw like say for example, Speedo had a chiseled Olympic swimmer in them, and I think that most men were intimidated by that. You know, it's like, I can't wear a pair of Speedos because I look like an investment banker with my clothes off.
And I have a tiny penis.
Yeah.
There's anxieties surrounding the swimwear that were put on the consumer, the Australian male particularly, by, you know, the unrealistic body standards that were applied by, you know, Olympic brands. I mean, for one, you've never sold goggles. You've never even had a sporting element to your. I don't think I've ever seen an athlete outside of the footy field wearing them.
Yeah, I don't think we've really got much traction in with actual swimmers.
No.
At all. Like what we saw the biggest challenge of at the start was not that our competition was other swimwear brands.
Yeah.
It was that no one was wearing like Budgy Smuggler style stuff. So we had to change the perception of what that was. And if we were going to go down the path of just completely oiled up, ripped dudes, it wouldn't really speak to the typical Australian male. So we made the call. Also, like the first guys we got wearing them had to be people that like had good banter and could also tell people to fuck off.
Yeah.
You know, because like you might be about to cop some shit.
Yeah.
And so I think we got, you know, the focus was on people that you want to have beers with.
Yeah.
And
just supreme confidence.
Yeah.
just like, good level of confidence, but focus on what they're like more than what their rig's like.
Yeah.
And if they're fit, that's fine. Like
That's
not
also fine.
It's not
Yeah.
anti, but if they're not, then that's you know, you're welcome in this church. You know?
Yeah.
So taking all of those things into account, I'd say the first time this really became like a fully national brand that was brought into the living rooms of millions of Australians was when 9 blokes at the Malaysian Grand Prix were caught wearing the Malaysian budgies, which I understand you no longer sell. And they were promptly arrested for public obscenity charges.
It was something along those lines. Yeah, I was on my way back from a Bucks in Bali, and had all these messages on my phone like, mate, some stuff's gone down. So I got like the Jetstar red eye or whatever over, and I didn't realise the scale of it at the time, but I turned up to, we were working from like 2 bedrooms of an apartment in Manly at the time, and Jared and a couple of the guys were there, and there was a few people milling around the front of the building.
Yeah.
And we were like, it'd be funny if that was the press.
Yeah.
And then one of them somehow got in the building, and there was this like a current affair style situation where they're knocking on the door like, will you please comment? But yeah, basically 9 blokes had gone to...
So it was the press for you guys?
It was the press.
For the budget, they were chasing a Budgy 9 story.
Yeah.
Right.
So, because they actually said that we had conspired with you
Yeah.
to...
Yeah, well, we reported on it. I like to think we coined the term Budgy 9 as well. Of course, once we'd figure out those gentlemen weren't facing execution, we coined the term Budgy 9.
Yeah, I think that we could have lived here if they just got the cane a few times.
That would be it. But yeah, we had...
It's a rite of passage.
That was one of the great fake news stories that was never told, that we had conspired with Budgy Smuggler to create an international incident in Malaysia.
And like what happened was, like Daniel Ricciardo has won on the last lap. Like these guys are just having a normal like afternoon, and then they've lost their shit, celebrating. You know, crowds going wild. This is a very rare event to happen. Then they've stripped out into their smugglers and started doing like shoeies. And
Ricardo style.
If you look at Danny Ricciardo style, if you look at the footage at the time, everyone's just sort of laughing and enjoying it. But there was one bloke there who wasn't, and it was his job to uphold like the spirit of Malaysia. And then so he got talking to them, and then he seemed to think that this was a genuine like conspiracy, that these guys had planned to do it to like make fun of Malaysia, which was just like, if Danny Ricciardo never wins that race, it never happened. So they're in jail, and then so I'm getting like these people from the press calling, and then so we just saying no comment, because like we didn't have anything directly to do with it. I'm like, said to one, do you call Nike every time someone robs a store in Nike gear? Like we even like. And then someone, I think they were from the Herald Sun. Is that a Melbourne paper?
It's Melbourne paper.
Yeah, is saying, I'm going to print that you and the Batuta Advocate have conspired to do this, and you've paid them to do this, unless you deny it. And I said, mate, I can print what you want. And then I was like, fuck, I hope they have it. So I think I called you and was like, you guys didn't pay them.
No, well, that's, they asked us the same question, and we said yes. And then, and they were like, "I don't believe you."
Yeah, there was a young they'd sent a young journalist. She was a young.
That's back on you, buddy.
She was pretty green, you could tell, and she called us and was like, thought she was onto something, and I was going along with it. Like, this would be very funny if it did make the news for your newspaper and for ours. But then I got the guilt a little bit, that I could tell that she was so green that this could potentially ruin her career. And I was just like, look, I'm not denying this to protect me. I'm denying it to protect you, love. Like, this could be fucking a very big black smudge next to your name.
One of the funniest things that happened to it was the phone started ringing hot from Malaysia.
Yeah.
People wanting the pairs.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like, we would have had like 40 or 50 phone calls in a couple of days just saying, and we'd obviously taken them down from online, wanting to prevent, like a future, a repeat of it.
Yeah. What was the issue though? They don't like seeing their flag used as underpants. Was that what they were thinking?
The pair itself was actually just the same as like the water polo team wears, but I think it was mainly that combined with drinking beer from a shoe in a Muslim country can be sometimes frowned upon. But they were. Like, you're in a Formula One race, so in that environment, it's not like they were doing it on the outside. Formula One-ing is a verb for spraying alcohol. So in that environment, I think it was fine. Yeah. But in the broader context of where they were, and they got some reasonable. I think I did 3 or 4 nights in jail. Yeah. They got one meal a day, which was a fish head with rice and a cup of water. So like. It was
not bad.
They learned though. They learned.
I don't know. I think it was for free as well. Yeah. So it's just an extended holiday. Yeah.
Oh, they deported him for free too. Now, tell us a bit about you did eventually win over a few sportsmen. Georgie Rose, the gorgeous George from the Manly Seagulls, a rather huskier gent, probably one of the last true big men of rugby league.
Yeah, like what the last samurai was to Japan,
Yeah.
George Rose was to burly, rotund-built front rowers. Like if he was
Yeah.
a fridge, he would be the most beautiful Westinghouse, like
Yes.
crisp off the shelf.
He's a bar fridge on legs, George, isn't he?
He's a beautiful man. He's a beautiful man.
So what happened there? Because they actually had a supplier.
So we noticed for a few years, like orders coming through from quite a number of, particularly rugby league, rugby union, a little bit AFL players. I think part of the reason for that was we went with a slightly different fabric, which is more comfortable to wear when you're playing sport than really chlorine resistant stuff. And so that was sort of coming through, but not at like a crazy rate. And then the phone rings one day and it's George Rose. And we had sort of like friends of friends, and he said, mate, this company's sponsored the club, and they've come down and done a photo shoot, and they've given pairs to all the good-looking players and like the fit players in the team. And he's like, here's, you know, poor gorgeous George in the corner with the fat boys.
Yeah.
And despite being the biggest lads, we appeared invisible.
Yeah,
And
they've all given him Snake Stewart, and all these pretty boys from the Manly side have been hooked up with the handsome the handsome brand.
That's it. Wolfman, maybe.
Yeah.
So he's like, but get us some pairs and I'll see if I can get them I'll get the boys around them, basically. So I drove to George's place in Brookvale. It was living like 200 metres from the Brookvale Oval, and went there with like 20 pairs. And at this stage, like every dollar I spent, I was sort of borrowing or spending from my income at AIME to pay for it. So like 20 pairs was like the biggest investment in Budgy Smuggler's history to this point in time. I've gone to his place and he had a spot on the couch where you could tell he was playing video games. Like it was nestled in nicely, and got George the pairs. And then by the end of the season, he had almost all of the team wearing them each week. But at the same time, the NRL or like jerseys had changed to this like very fitted number, which did not suit or like wasn't as practical for George. So every time he would get tackled, his pants would get pulled down and you would see what pair he was wearing. And then the commentators cottoned onto it, and they would then start commentating like, what pair will George be wearing this week? Oh, he's in the Cougar Baits tonight. Oh, George, he's in the fully fluorinated. It's going to be a red hot game. And after the game, what are you wearing this week? So he was a big connector, and probably like the perfect person that Budgy Smuggler's about, you know, like he's sporting and athletic, but not image obsessed. You know, he's a person that you want to have a beer with and a laugh. And after that, I don't know if he gave my phone number out or something, but a lot of NRL players started calling, hey, brother, like, let's get it. And other codes as well. So that was the start of it, getting kind of more embedded in the different footballing codes.
Tell us about when was your first real rush? When was what summer was it where you were like, oh, we might need to upscale a few more hands in the... Yeah,
I mean, the first milestone was when we sold 24 pairs in a day.
Yeah, right.
And I was like...
Down a wharf bar.
I was like, whoa, we've done one pair an hour for a whole day. And like, we're not quite there yet, but... Oh, maybe we are. Like, now it's like a pair a minute is the kind of goal.
Yeah.
So it's like the scale... You know, in the Christmas time, not for the whole year. Then we're fucking all going to Wharf Bar, lads. I could buy Wharf Bar and a yacht. No, for the first time, it was hitting 24 orders a day. I was just like, fuck, because I remember when 24 orders was like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, and you're there. I remember multiple days at the start, like. It wouldn't matter how much I was paying stock per order. There was no orders.
Yeah.
You know, I only have like 3 days in a row with no orders.
Yeah.
And be like, fuck, what have I done?
And you're back. You're back in town running AIME. You come home.
Log
open the server and
it's like
nothing's happened today, boys.
It's like that episode from The Simpsons when Bart's running for class president. It's like, how many people voted for him. It's like none. It's like, I demand a recount.
So what made you keep going in those days where, where there wasn't any orders coming in, there were no days at Wharf Bar?
Yeah, well, one...
Wharf Bar's a gold standard of a good day.
That's when you've made it in Manly. One thing was I had a job. So I didn't need to rely on the income from Budgy Smuggler, and that provides you with enormous freedom.
Yeah.
So, all the advice I got given early about how to make money for Budgy Smuggler would have worked in the short term, but in the long run, I think maybe not so much. So people said, no one's buying Budgy Smugglers, so make something else. Make like Euros were big at the time, like Daniel Craig and Bond and that sort of thing. Make it in China. And I was just like, not interested. And because I had a job,
You could make those calls, yeah.
I didn't have to, I could just kind of follow what I was interested in, which is what we did. And it also was growing. So if you look at those early years, it was like 1,000 pairs, 1,500, 2,200, 3,000. And so we were always growing. For the first 10 years, we did 50%, between 40 and 70% a year, every year. And if you average 50% a year for 5 years, you're 10 times as big at the end of it.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, if we can just kind of keep on that, I've got time on my side. I was like, I'm in this for the long haul, I got like a 10, 20-year horizon here. So, yeah, we're kind of I'm 10, 11 years in now, and it's, everything at scale becomes much easier.
You had people on the payroll before you're paying yourself?
Yeah. So we had 3 full-time before I was able to make the leap.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I made the leap and moved overseas because it was like these guys were running the company so well. It would just kind of been weird if I started turning up each day, demanding the good car park and that sort of thing. So I was like, fuck, I'm not actually that useful here because I was always away doing AIME. What's the next frontier for Budgy?
So the next frontier, it seemed, to launch it in the United Kingdom, obviously a beach mecca. But it is
Blackpool.
It is the gateway for many Australians to Europe.
Yeah, so it was pretty funny. Even the bloke at customs thought I was joking when I was like first moved there. And he's like, what are you going to do when you're here? I'm like, I've got a swimwear business, Budgy Smuggler. And he's like, no, seriously. He's like getting other immigration people in, like, listen to this bloke. They're like, you serious? I'm like, I'm serious. And it was a bit like when I first started at Budgy here, like calling my friends and being like, all excited. And they're like, I'm like, I've taken over Budgy Smuggler. They're like, you've what? They're like, why? And I'm like, mate, remember we ran the city to surf in it? It was so much fun. And they're like, yeah, that was like ironic. Like no one's actually going to buy that. And so going to the UK was a little bit of deja vu.
Yeah.
And going through do you know that it's not sunny here for like 10 months of the year?
Do you sell well with the Euros? Because when you kind of think about the Budgy Smuggler kind of look, that you're always thinking just hairy Greek man, right? That's, I mean, oiled up, yes, but not necessarily, abs of steel. Do you do well in that world? And have you made moves on the yacht weeks and that kind of sun Europe? I mean, it's just next door, and I mean, for a little while, UK, you can fly quite easily from the UK to Europe.
That's it. So France is actually the third biggest market for us. So it goes Australia, UK, France, and it's actually illegal. I've got to. Shout outs to Macron because it's actually illegal to wear pants in like shorts in pools in France. So they're legislating in our favour. And if there's any political staffers listening to this, then I'd encourage.
Do you have any idea why that's the case?
I think they say I think part of it's like just fuck you. Like this is what we. This is what we wear. We don't want this kind of Americanized because kind of wearing shorts is a little bit ridiculous. Like, where do you stop the line if you're going swimming, like fucking in jeans? It doesn't make that much sense. I'm not sure when it's like started in the 70s or 80s or something. But yeah, I think the reason that they give is around the official reason is around hygiene, and that if you're sitting in your shorts or you got shit in your pockets, that it can potentially contaminate the pool.
Yeah, right.
But I think partly it's just this is what we do. And
Yeah,
we don't like it.
Well,
Cultural.
They're a bit ahead of the Poms because I read an article last year, Adam, that said that the UK's most loathed item of clothing was tight swimming trunks.
We were more unpopular than turtlenecks and Crocs.
Really?
Which I think's kind of a... I like Crocs though, actually.
And turtlenecks actually have a place too, with a chain on the outside.
I was at a rugby club in Exeter in the UK a couple of weeks back and told the guys that, and they're like, our fancy dress for the end of season 2 is sorted. The 3 most popular run items of clothing in the UK combined. Yeah, so I think 78% of people said that they hated Speedo or Budgy. The title was, the headline on the BBC was "Bad Day for Budgy Smugglers." But I'm like, hey, if you're not first, you're last.
Yeah.
We've still got 22% that are in the game here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you'd hate to be, like there's another one on this list. You'd hate to be a manufacturer of Uggs, red trousers, clothes with elbow patches. That's bad for the rugby union boys. Flares, Crocs, leather trousers. But
Red trousers is particularly specific.
Yeah, not too many people can pull them off. Like
Red trousers. The Aboriginal flag has been an interesting one for you because players in footballers particularly, you've seen it more recently have been Kurtley Beale or Jonathan Thurston with the Aboriginal mouthguard. You kind of gave them the first kind of opportunity to wear a bit of red, black, and yellow with the budgies.
yeah, so like we used to make like quite a few different flags, and then I think maybe Kurtley and some of the Aboriginal boys were like, "Can you do an Aboriginal flag?" I was like 100%, and I've been very lucky that Aboriginal people have been such a good, like, probably the dominant influence in my adult life. Like I'm very lucky. So yeah, we were stoked to do that, and I think like a lot of brands or companies are very like a bit scared of it, maybe. Whereas it's
They kind of view it the same as using Aboriginal art in their clothing. Is it?
Yeah, and I think just like aren't happy to embrace it maybe. Whereas early on we ran like a swimwear parade called Strut the Streets for 4 or 5 years, and that raised like $250,000 for Aboriginal education, and it was kind of around that time that people were like, hey, we want to show pride in our culture through a pair that's got the flag on it. So that's how that happened.
So more recently we've been seeing you in the media for a different cause, as opposed to doing things overseas to bring down governments, but and that's more or less around the ordinary rig. Can you tell us a bit about what the ordinary rig is?
Yeah, so ordinary rig started for quite a few years. We were keen to take the piss out of the Victoria's Secret parade. I was like, this is just getting too much and starting to piss me off, like this kind of impossibly perfect vision of what it means to like be kind of a track. I'm like, this fucking thing has a shelf life. This is definitely got a shelf life. So our original idea was to do some sort of smuggler parade to Smuggler's Secret or something to match that. And then the tipping point, though, was we had these kids come into the office in Manly from out in Western Sydney, like rugby league kids, about to go on schoolies, rat's tails ready. And they made a comment around, we've been getting our rigs in order to go on schoolies, like we're going to be so ripped. And we just looked around. We looked around in the office and we were like, oh, fuck, like 16-year-old, 17-year-old boys are so image conscious, like they're shredding for schoolies. Like I'm just like, fuck, like we've lost it's changed in the 10, 15 years since I was going there, where that wasn't really front of mind. So I'm like, all right, we need
just how many UDLs have you got?
Red Bears? Yeah. Fucking Red Bears, man. Oh, fuck. And so it's like, all right, we need to do something to counter the narrative about, what's the kind of ideal And so we're like, all right, let's have a contest where we celebrate the ordinary. And I also think like everyone is a bit ordinary in like at most things.
Yeah.
You know, so it's an easy concept to identify with. I have little idea why so many companies are always trying to be amazing. Like just be a bit shit and get around it. So
Unless you're an airline. You know.
Shout out
our
Jetstar.
safety rating is okay.
Our safety rating's a bit shit.
And
We had a tyre changed on our plane while we were waiting the other day. Oh fuck, it was scary. And then the guy goes, "It was Jetstar. Shout out Jetstar. Thanks to the scabs that were still working that could get us in the air." And this guy the pilot's just too much information on the way to Melbourne for the book launch. He goes, "Sorry about that, guys. Obviously, you know there's strikes around the country today. These delays haven't been related to the strikes. They have been technically because the ground staff are under the pump working extra hard covering shifts. But luckily, they were able to notice that one of the tyres needed changing because it was down to the canvas. So let's go." And then it's like, way too much information, big fella.
It's like, just tell me that Melbourne hasn't got enough room for us yet, and we got to wait on the tarmac for a spot to open up. Don't tell me that this plane is not airworthy, because what if you've missed something more important than a fucking tire?
a wing.
So you kind of went a bit more, not so much the Dove angle, which Dove is like, you know, beautiful, all shapes and sizes are beautiful, but you went the, no, ordinary is beautiful.
Yeah.
Or
like a
or
rock
men
pigeon.
are ordinary.
Yeah.
And it
You're not a
wasn't,
dove, you're a seagull.
yeah. And it wasn't a sloppy rig contest either. Like some people were like, "Oh my god,
Well-
you're encouraging male obesity." Like, no, we had strict conditions. You had to look like you could run for a taxi and swing an axe.
Yeah.
And that you were, what else was it? You could throw a child in a pool, which
Yep.
is, you know, very important
Yep.
pastime. And that was about it.
There was
Yeah.
one guy, we were privy to the selection process because we were, as we said earlier, MCs for the inaugural,
2016.
inaugural
Yes.
Ordinary Rigs. We were the hosts, Clancy and Errol.
Sam Perry's
And
great cricketer came in and
yeah,
Yeah.
George Rose was
Oh,
a
yeah.
judge as well.
yeah.
George Rose, who probably, given the criteria you've just mentioned, probably wouldn't have been able to fit in. But there were some ordinary rigs in the selection process. And I actually remember one of you saying there was one guy that you couldn't look at. Sent through his photo. It was like, that's
were
just
lots
too
of
much, mate.
very, very big nipples.
Yeah.
You know.
No, but like blokes who'd had like done a proper
Yeah.
injury playing sport.
Like
who
the
can't-
bottom of a can.
Or have like ex-sportsmen's bodies are the most ordinary, right? The guys who've come from great heights.
Yep. And like just the other day in the airport, I ran into Matthew Hayden, and he looks like shit. He's been eating too much of his own chicken casserole. Yeah, no.
Good through the covers though. wasn't it?
Yeah.
Good through the covers, but he's been eating dooners. You know.
But no, yeah, we decided that we'd celebrate the ordinary. So this competition, we flew the top 10 with their friends from around Australia in, and they had to do like a talent and answer some judges' questions, kind of like a Miss World pageant meets Victoria's Secret. And there was, of course, a runway parade with their own home-devised wings. I think Dingo, who won it, had giant chicken wings.
Yeah.
There was
VB, a lot of one guy made wings out of crushed VB cans. There was a lot. You
Yeah.
can tell there was a lot of arts and crafts. A lot of blokes, grown men, had asked their mums to help.
Well,
you could
yes.
see.
Oh, there was the white feathers, and the guy's mum was an art teacher. Like,
He said he slashed a pillow. He went to 40 Wings, came home to mum and just tore a knife through these pillows, and she helped him glue the feathers to his wings.
I think there's actually like blokes actually do want to express like some level of creativity.
Well, you had the dance as well. Had the dance and the talent show.
Yeah.
It was a lot of worms. That's the go-to, I think, for a lot of guys. Yeah, you see it at every wedding you go to. Someone can do the worm. Every one of those blokes could do the worm. You know, back in the day, there was Big Brother for the funniest bloke in your group of mates. And nowadays, there's not really many avenues for them to just be hilarious on a grand stage. And that was it, because these were, each contestant on Ordinary Rig was the funniest bloke from their group of mates. And when we went into your office the day before the first Ordinary Rig comp, I remember seeing from a distance, before we'd said hi to anyone, 12 of the exact same blokes on the balcony, and someone cracked a joke, and all of them went, all at the same time. They're the exact same person, same sense of humour. They played the same role in their group of mates, and they finally got to be with their own people.
I think that's one criterion that I think isn't really pushed to the forefront when you're choosing, the most ordinary riggers, that they need to be able to hold court.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we've done the same comp in the UK now.
Yeah.
And then we flew the top 3 from the UK to Australia.
Made them be friends.
Yeah. They put him in the same house. And we treated them like celebrities. So almost our entire marketing budget for the year was spent on an Ordinary Rig campaign.
Yeah.
And that's why it's good not having any investment, because we could just do shit that we think is funny.
Yeah.
And potentially at some point down the road, that pays off. But just following, things mainly for the own interest of, the staff. But the English lads gave it a good crack and actually brought home the urn.
So where to from here for Budgy Smuggler? Have you even dipped your toe in America? Florida, Cancun?
It's funny you mentioned
Arizona.
So I was in the States a little while ago, and they don't necessarily understand the self-deprecating humour. So you explain what Budgy Smuggler means, and you're like, it's like you're hiding like a small bird, and they just, there's a sort of blank look, and they're like, why would you choose a small bird?
Yeah, why wouldn't you call them like a parrot smuggler or something?
Smuggler.
A fucking eagle smuggler. You should call it an eagle smuggler. And it's like, oh no, that's not the point.
Yeah. It's like I know that your soft, flaccid penis is the size of a budgie just from looking at you.
Embrace it.
Yeah.
And as a result, we haven't quite had the traction there. Whereas South Africa, for instance, they get it, and I thought they wouldn't necessarily be around it as hard as they are, but they're like, bro, give me the most outrageous pair you have, my man, and I will rep this. So South Africa's been a wonderful bright spot for us. France gets it. The UK definitely gets it. We did a pop up in Germany recently, and they say, like, when you hear it translated, they're like, oh, that's funny. So, even Japan, I think, I don't know if this is right, but they can't pronounce the letter, or they don't have the letter L in their vernacular or their alphabet. So it was Adam Ashley Cooper was telling me the story of explaining it to the guys, and the bloke who's Japanese bloke saying, Budgy Smuggler, and there was just silence. And then boom, the whole team's just fucking lost their shit and got it. So there's a few more places around the world than not get it, but the US isn't quite taking off.
Yeah, well, say for example, if you were going to sell them in continental Europe, for your next big expansion, would you stick with the English spelling, or would you try to translate it into the local dialect? Whereas, how do you translate Budgy Smuggler into Italian?
Have you got an answer for us on this one? I have heard it in a...
Yeah, I was hoping you'd be able to.
So in 2008,
regale us.
We made some pairs for the Beijing Olympics, and one of our main sewers. So our first sewer, we've used him since day one. A bloke, Arnold. He was 63 when he started. Sorry, 68 when he started with us. He's 83 now.
Right.
He's still running our main swimwear factory. And we asked him when he's going to retire, and he said if he stops doing it, he's gonna lose it upstairs. So he's still going. But one of his main sewers there, Lee's Chinese, and so we made pairs for the Beijing Olympics, and we translated Budgy Smuggler into Chinese. She gets us the pairs, and she's like, oh, Adam, this doesn't say Budgy Smuggler. I was like, what does it say? So I should say I got my 6'3" redheaded mate who said he spoke fluent Chinese to translate it. She goes, it doesn't say Budgy Smuggler. I say, what does it say? And she goes, it says small bird cage. I was like, it's actually pretty fucking good. Let's run with it.
I've Googled a couple, so I've got English, Italian, and German. So this is the French translation of Budgy Smuggler is contrabandeur peu chose.
Contraband, yep. Be said in Spanish.
Smuggler, contraband.
And this is the Italian translator, contrabbandier meco.
That's like romantic.
Yeah.
I'd fuck you.
Immediately.
That's a big... But say that again after the German translation. Kumpelschmuggler.
I feel like I've been locked in a basement.
Smuggler.
Kumpelschmuggler.
Well, all the best, Adam and the Budgy team, heading into what looks like, statistically, through a complete anomaly, the hottest summer we've ever had coming up.
Yep, complete outlier.
Complete outlier. Yep. I wish you all the best, and what a yarn. And we might get you on back next time. We'll talk about AIME from top to bottom. Bring you on here with Bancroft, maybe.
Love to. Thanks for it, and great to see Batuta powering the only non-fake news in our nation.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, Lenny.
For that kind comment.